Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here and welcome back to the workbench and another quick unboxing. Today I'm taking a look at this, the 1/72nd scale PM model Spitfire Mark 5B floatplane. And yes, your eyes don't deceive you, it really is a Spitfire on floats. So without any further ado, join me as I take a look inside the box of this kit and see what it's like. So starting on the front cover here, we've got a rather attractive drawn image in some quite stylish artwork of the subject of the model. Up here, this roundel here tells us that there is only one decal scheme. That's generally what PM do with their artwork now. If there's different nationalities on there, that's how many there are. However, there's only the one, so there's just this one scheme included. Over here on the right, we've got an item code, which is PM216. Flipping over to the back, it's exactly the same. However, you can see that there was a price tag up there and I paid £6.45 for this. I'll talk about the price a little bit later. Onto the longer edges of the box, you can see here we've got a marking here saying made in Turkey and a sticker which I believe covers the original text and has other information about where it was imported by. You can see that it was actually imported by Bachmann, which most of you will know is quite a big model company, model trains primarily, but 14 years and older is the age of this kit, the intended age at least. Flipping onto the short edges, we've got just the same as on the front, so you can identify it on the shelf. And then the other long edge, which I neglected to have a look at just now, we've got just a couple of examples of other kits which come in the PM range, which is a Yak 15 and a Beach C45. Two other interesting kits. I always find that PM models tend to make interesting subjects. But interesting or not, let's have a look inside the box of this one. And as you can see, everything comes included in one protective bag. So let's get that open. And as usual, I'm going to start by looking at the instructions. This little extra artwork sheet is included, which is quite a nice touch. And I presume you could frame that or put it up on your wall if you wanted to. The instructions are here. And it's been a long time since I've done a PM models kit. And this seems a lot better than the old instructions that came with that one that I did. I think it was a Sea Fury or something like that. That was years ago, it was like 20 years ago. So this looks quite nice. So we've got a A4 piece of paper which folds out a bit like a brochure. We've got information here about the actual Spitfire floatplane in different languages and some specifications on the aircraft. We'll just flip over quickly. Flipping over, we've got full colour painting and decal placement instructions for the model, and you can see down here that we've got different paint colour callouts for a variety of different brands. We've got Humbrol, Model Master, Guns and Extra Colour. Obviously if you want to use different paints on top of that, then you're going to have to convert them yourself. And then over on this side we've got our assembly instructions, and it looks fairly simple. We've got a very simple key at the top here. Blue is glue, orange is do not glue, green is cut. So we assemble our propeller together, put it inside the fuselage halves, we put on our tailplane by the looks of it, then we move on to adding our canopy and engine exhausts, and then we work on the float planes. Coming over here, it looks like it wants us to cut parts of the cannons off and then glue the float planes on. So it doesn't look to be a very complicated build to do. The instructions seem reasonably easy to follow, but it does seem to be quite a simple kit given the sort of information we've got on the instructions. So before we look at the plastic parts, let's have a quick look at the decals. The decals look okay. The printing is generally alright. They seem a little bit thick. They remind me ever so slightly of Academy decals, so hopefully they go onto the model alright. But they look absolutely fine to me. They're not up to the quality of other decal sheets from other manufacturers, but they are still absolutely fine by the looks of it at the moment. I guess it all remains to be seen is what they actually are like when we stick them onto the model. We'll have a quick look at the clear plastic part first, and as you can see, it's just the one for the cockpit canopy. And there are moulded canopy frame lines on there, but they're not amazing, and the ones on the front here, they don't really seem to be present. But the plastic in itself is quite clear with minimal flash. There is a bit of flash here on the edge, and there doesn't seem to be any cracks or major blemishes, so that's not too bad as far as clear parts go. And then grey plastic parts, what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me get them all in shot. There we go. 5. So there's sort of, they're not really 5 sprues, it's like one sprue which has been sort of cut up into lots of different parts. And I think it is worth mentioning, and I'm sure you'll probably notice it, but the original Spitfire parts are ever so slightly different. They're slightly more shiny than the slightly newer additions, which are the floats, because the floats are extra parts apparently. And the extra parts were added to the kit back in 2009, so they should be a little bit better quality than the rest of it, and I'll talk more about that shortly. So let's have a look at this one first. Let's move the other side of the way. Coming in close, so you can see there's a bit of flash on there. What have we got? Propeller and 1 or 2 halves of one side of the float. The detail is all raised. There doesn't seem to be much in the recess department, and the plastic itself is quite hard. I imagine it'll be quite brittle, so just be careful when you're using it so you don't cause it to crack or anything. Let's look at the other floats. Yep, they're pretty much identical to the ones we've just looked at. Flash on these is minimal. The plastic doesn't feel particularly greasy. There is a slight hint of grease from the mould release from when they moulded it, so it might be worth giving this a wash. Onto this one now. So we've got a few little recess details here just to mark out your lines between the elevators and the main part of the tail there. We've got our landing gear legs here, and you can see that the actual legs are moulded onto the covers, which is a product of the time when this was redesigned. Air intake, engine, exhausts, tail wheel, main wheels, and other various small items. Generally the moulding seems to be okay. There are a few blemishes, there is flash, the detail is not amazing. Onto the wings then, and as previously mentioned, everything's raised details on there. And it is interesting to note actually that on here the landing gear is like moulded on. See that there's like a moulded representation of the landing gear there, which is a bit strange. So I presume that at the time this was moulded, if you didn't want to have your landing gear attached, you could just take them out of those holes and just paint that to make it look like it was the landing gear. Not a massive fan of that design choice, but that's how they've decided to do it. So those are the wings, and then moving on to the main fuselage. Again, detail is very sparse. The plastic is incredibly smooth and shiny, so it might be worth getting a primer onto this when you build it. And then flipping over, there's no detail on the inside, which I can say would be expected of the sort of period this was moulded. I don't think this is a particularly accurate kit in the sense that it sort of looks like a Spitfire, but it isn't like 100% true to scale, so there's going to be some dimensions which are a bit off. It's going to look a bit chunky in some places and a bit like not Spitfire-y in others. But that being said, it will make an interesting subject. So let's start wrapping this one up. We've got a number of sprue parts in grey plastic, which might need a bit of a wash. Detail is not really there. It looks quite old in the style of design, of tooling. We've got a clear plastic part, which, you know, is fine. It'll do the job. There's no issue. I did notice actually whilst I'm talking that there's no pilot, so if you wanted to put a pilot in this, you're going to have to find one for yourself. We've got a decal sheet, which looks alright actually. I can't really speak much about PM decals because I haven't really built that many, and I think the last time that I built a PM Models kit they just forgot to put the decals in, so I had to make do with my own. So it'll be interesting to see how these are. We've got our instruction sheet, which actually, you know, I can't really fault it. It's simple. It's to the point, it tells you what you need to know, and it's not overly complicated. And it's in colour, and I love it when they're in colour because it makes it so much easier to know what you should be painting what. We've got a nice little art sort of sheet. Put that on your wall, frame it if you want. And all of that comes contained inside a rather attractive box, if I'm honest. So, talk a little bit about the history of this kit. So the particular version I have here was first released back in 2009 with the new parts for the floats. However, this version actually dates from 2020. The price that you see on there, £6.45, I think that's the recommended retail price, particularly here in the UK, because obviously it's got to be imported. Not sure that it's worth £6.45. That does seem a little bit steep for what you're actually getting, considering that other manufacturers have, you know, in comparison to other kits, they don't necessarily have this sort of experimental float plane, but they have like Spitfires and things with more decal schemes for around the same price and better quality. So it might not necessarily be worth that amount of money. Personally, I would have preferred to get it a bit cheaper, but as a review channel, you know, these are the sort of compromises I have to make. Anyway, yeah, you probably saw a little shot there of my my notes. These are the notes I make when I make my videos, so that's a little bit behind the scenes bit there for you there. And yeah, so 2009 was when the extra parts were added, but actually this was based off the original 5B/5C kit. It was released previously in 2017 just as the 5B 5C with different decal scheme and box artwork, but it is worth knowing, and it's quite hard to find out this exact date, but I believe that this was originally tooled back in 1982. And when you think about the age of the tooling, it kind of makes sense that it hasn't got the wealth of detail that we have today. It's a bit of a clunky kit. It's not exactly the best detailed. It's still got raised details. Yes, there were kits back in the 80s which had recessed details, but being a more cheap and cheerful kit, you know, this is going to have sort of the older design aesthetic going with it. So maybe it's a little bit overpriced, maybe it's a bit clunky, but it's going to be an interesting build, especially as I don't think I've ever built a float plane before. And that's the main reason I bought it. I don't always buy kits based on sort of their quality. Sometimes I buy them based on how cheap they are. I know this one isn't exactly cheap, but I looked at it and I thought it would look fun. It would be an interesting and different model to build. And that's why it has made its way into my stash. So hopefully at some point in the future I might get around to building this one, and hopefully because there aren't that many parts it won't be too long or too enduring of a build. Anyways, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and I hope that my review was fair. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with me. Have you built one of these? Were there any issues that you came up with? Or, you know, are there any other suggestions for videos that you might like to see in the future? Quick shout out to my patrons and channel members on Patreon and here on YouTube for the extra support they give the channel. For more information, take a look at the link in the description to find out how you can get involved. If you're new here and don't want to miss any future modelling videos, please click that subscribe button, and if you enjoyed this video, click that like button. Finally, I think the last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.